All right, so I finally got the chance to play Throne and Liberty. And you know what? How do I put this? Anytime a new MMO comes out, I have a pretty simple method of figuring out whether or not I'm enjoying the game. Basically, if the first day of playing flies by and then come day 2, I can't wait to hop back in, that's a great sign. Like if I wake up extra early in the morning, pumped to play again, literally jumping out of bed, when that happens, I can confidently say, yes, I am enjoying it. And if any MMO is going to stand a chance at keeping me engaged longer term, it at the very least has to do that. Like if I am not hyped and rearing to go come day 2, the game stands no chance at keeping me entertained 2 weeks later, right? Now, in the case of my time with Throne and Liberty, I wanted to stop playing about halfway through my first day, and by the end of when day 6 rolled around, I was certainly ready to play something else. Now, no one's forcing me to play, right? Of course not. But I love MMOs as a genre. I want to give each of these games a fair shake. And I also want my coverage to be somewhat competent. Like, I don't need to be an expert with 200 plus hours in every game, but I at least want to play enough to really see if there is something in there that I can enjoy. And there are stuff I like about Throne and Liberty, but there is more things that I haven't.
Unfortunately, while there were lots of players, while there were little nodes to mine, while there were monsters to kill, while there were quests and side quests to engage in, the world still kind of felt empty. The world felt like you just moved from point A to point B to point A, back to point B, then to eventually point C. That is a very boring method of progression. Now, I understand this is the leveling experience, but the leveling experience should still grip you. It should enthrall you. It should make you want to keep participating in that experience. One thing that MMOs tend to always do wrong is they bore you to death with the introductory experience, so much so that you don't want to keep playing. Throne and Liberty is another prime example of that. It is absolutely no different to other MMOs, but due to that, as a direct consequence of being the same as 10 other MMOs, why would I want to do that for the 11th time in a row? It's just boring.
For starters, the combat, it's just pretty bad. This was the #1 complaint that I kept seeing crop up over those first couple of days when I was looking at discussion about this game, when I was talking to people about it. And I agree, I think it's one of the biggest issues that I have with the game, and I can see why a lot of people were complaining. Now, they have announced that there are updates coming, which include a revamp to the skill system. I'm just not sure if that's gonna fix the core problems and the issues that have resulted in so many people saying, I think the combat feels bad. So what is the issue here? Well, from what I played so far, I'd say compared to every other tab target and even the hybrid action MMOs, which Throne and Liberty is kind of trying to split the difference, it's simply not as good, smooth, or fluid as a lot of the other games I've played. Targeting is clunky, which I think is a big issue that people often overlook. And I also think there's a bit of latency and lack of responsiveness to everything. Just again, overall, I think the combat feels bad. Now, you will see people reply when this critique comes up saying, but this is a tab target MMO. It's just like every other tab target MMO. It's exactly like WoW. What's the difference? And this is crazy to me. Like, what are you talking about? There are better and worse versions of combat systems in every single genre. The games that stand out as having good combat do so when compared to the games that have bad combat. Like when people say Bungie makes some of the best feeling first-person shooting, that's because it feels better than other FPS games that feel worse. Just like how not every Souls-like feels as good as the core Souls games. Some do, but many don't. That applies here as well. Just because Throne and Liberty is a tab target game doesn't mean that it is done as well as every other tab target game. Of course not. There's not some magic button that the developers press when making their game that goes boop, you now have a perfectly implemented iteration of your desired combat system that feels just as good as all the best games out there. That's not how any of this works, not at all. Subjectively, I just think Throne and Liberty feels inferior to many of the other tab target MMOs that I've played.
This game feels like a convoluted mess of abilities. It feels severely underwhelming. I feel like the multi-weapon system was done incredibly well in Guild Wars 2. They perfected that feature. In Throne and Liberty, it's just you equip 2 weapons and you have a bunch of abilities and that's it. Not to mention the entire ability window, the skills, everything. Just, it was overwhelming. Very little was explained. I feel like you were met with dozens of systems that just weren't ever explained. You had so many things to learn that were just introduced to you en masse or just unlocked immediately. You had absolutely no time to slowly be introduced to and learn these features, these mechanics over time. Typically, traditionally, you are in MMOs. It's a slow burn where you're introduced to everything over time. In this, they hit you with everything to kind of like set you up with all these insane features, these insane things to do. But when you have too many things to do, you don't really want to do any of them. You just want to slowly explore the world. You just want to fight some cool monsters. You just want to group up with your friends and do shit. You want to engage with the story, right? It's overwhelming.
For as good as the world looks, I also feel like it's all a bit lifeless and soulless feeling. There's like a real lack of character and personality to the play space. A lot of it just feels like a generic fantasy world. It looks pretty, but it feels pretty generic and without much cohesion to it. And also, like, it feels like the enemies were just kind of plopped into position. Like, hey, place enemies so many meters apart within the sand dune, and that's like how they designed it. I don't know. The result of this, though, really is that the world has not felt very immersive for me, and this coupled with the poor combat, I think, is a large part of the reason why I wasn't really motivated to keep playing. I made myself do it, but I wasn't really thoroughly enjoying it. I wasn't immersed in the space, and it didn't feel great to play. And that really killed my motivation. So also, lack of PvE content. Now, I am fully aware I went into playing this game knowing this was a PvP focused game. Even still, I am shocked like how little PvE content is. There's practically nothing. So you've got 6 co-op dungeons and a handful of open world dungeons, and then those hourly public events. But that is basically it for PvE in the game. Like, yeah, there's Taydel's Tower, but that is a one-off thing as far as I can tell. You do it once and then you're pretty much done with it forever, unless they reset it seasonally or something. So besides doing dailies, doing your contracts, and purchasing your time-gated resources and currencies, there's really not much else to do but PvP, and that is fine if you like PvP, right? There will still be plenty for you to enjoy. You'll have months of fun. Well, maybe or maybe not if the global release is anything like the Korean one. So here's a recap of how things went from someone who played The Throne and Liberty when it launched in Korea last December. They said in the first 2 months there were many guilds fighting each other. ZVZ at the time was very chaotic and interesting. Also, because of the chaos, small guilds could join in the battle and have fun as well. However, 2 months later, some guilds gradually withered or merged into bigger alliances, and then the server PvP all of a sudden revolved around 2 to 4 giant alliances. Small guilds at that point had no chance to participate unless they merged. And then at the 3 to 5 month mark, the entire server is left alone or merged into a single alliance that monopolizes all PvP activities. PvP is like a pool of stagnant water. Many players quit the game. Now, this is like a regular problem with PvP focused games, and it seems like Throne and Liberty hasn't done much to mitigate it, or at least that wasn't the case in the Korean launch. Not first-hand experience here. This is second-hand what I'm giving you, but doesn't look well for the long-term lifespan of PvP-focused players in this game.
I haven't engaged in the endgame, so I don't know if the endgame is fun. I don't know if it's pay to win. I don't know if the game is significantly better once you get there. What I do know is if you have to get through all that crap, if you have to sit there struggling to prevent yourself from falling asleep until you inevitably make it to that point at the end of the game when you have finished and completed everything else the game has to offer, then that game is not worth my time personally. I have a very finite amount of time. As a content creator that runs this channel and my gacha channel, I have to prioritize where I want to dedicate my time, what games I want to dedicate my time to. I don't have time to spend 50, 100, 200 hours sifting through shit to find that little hidden gem, that part in the game where it actually becomes enjoyable. That is so many days wasted. Games should be fun from the get-go. You should be able to enjoy yourself playing the game hour 1, hour 3, hour 5, hour 10. You shouldn't have to wait for hour 50, 100, 200 to begin experiencing that. And I don't believe that I'm the only one that feels that way. When you look at the Steam charts, it peaked at 61,154 and then very rapidly began a severe decline. People were logging out very rapidly. Disinterest in the game was very evident. Player concurrency numbers should not dip that fast that soon.
Another thing that I was surprised by was how small the game was. So the playable area consists of 2 main regions, and it's just pretty small. I don't know what else to say. I think this is one of the smallest open world MMOs I've ever played in terms of actual play space. There's just not a lot of map to explore here. Now, they do have clear plans to expand. You can already see the zones in the north sketched out, but that's not in the game currently. I don't know what the total time would be, but if I were to guess, I would say like 10 or 15 minutes walking from one end of the map to another. I mean, it's a pretty small game. It is. I was shocked by how tiny this was for an open world MMO. Menus, menus, menus. This game has billions of menus and currencies and progression systems, and I'm not going to run through them all other than to tell you there's a ton of these. There's a ton of clicking through menus and submenus and claiming rewards for completing these things, and I'm just so sick and tired of this being in every new MMO. These free-to-play games are plagued with these multiple reward tracks and progression systems and currencies, and I just think it makes these games demonstrably worse without questions. These games would just be so much better if they got rid of all those menus and if they put all of these currencies and resources and just had them in the game. Like, imagine if I just went out, I killed enemies, I completed quests, and I got rewards without all of these added layers of BS, without the daily time gating for currencies and all this. It's just, I just hate it so much, and this game is plagued with it. And this is not exclusive to Throne and Liberty. Billions of menus and time gated content and billions of crafting currencies and resources. Par for the course in the genre at this point, but that doesn't make me any less sick of it.
Yes, there is a lot to do in this game. Yes, this game is very pretty. No, this game is not a bad game. This is not a bad game at all. It's just okay. But when you have the opportunity to play an okay game or an incredible game, why would you dedicate any time to the okay game when you could be enjoying, enthralling yourself in the incredible game? It just makes no sense. While Throne and Liberty might be a great game to some people, I just don't think it's going to be for a lot of us. I don't think this is the MMO we were hoping for or expecting. And based off of what I've played right now, I think it's just not a fun game. And given the mass exodus of players in Korea, given the significant decline in terms of concurrent players over the course of the last 24 hours, I'm not the only one that feels that way. Again, I don't think it's bad, I just don't think it's very good. And due to that, it's not something I'd play.